Hi, this is Corey Johnston, and today's lesson is going to be a continuation and a prequel of previous lessons from the 13th chapter in the book of Matthew. This is where the parables really explode. We are introduced to the parable at the conclusion of the Sermon of the Mount, the one who builds his house on the sand and the one who builds his house on the sea. That concludes it, but the Sermon of the Mount is distinct from the third speech. Matthew's account is arranged into 5 sermons where everything is underlined in red. The first of which is the Sermon of the Mount, chapters 5 through 7. The second of which is the calling and the commission of the 12 and the 70. That's from chapter 9 to 11:1, and then the parables are the 13th begins the third of these, and it is distinct from its predecessors in that they are usually presented in unveiled simplicity, but the demands of the ministry and the occasion, that because of the opposition that was mounting and accruing against him, he had to resort to cryptic language to conceal his message from stubborn-hearted and spiritually weak people, and to unlock and unleash the power of heaven and the secrets, the mysteries, the revelations of the new dispensation. So parables are a literary device. Our personal definition is an instructive illustration that uses familiar imagery to illustrate a didactic truth. Didactic being designed to impart or inform a moral lesson. So we are introduced to this in the range that we've covered. This is what this lesson will be a sequel to, is the parable, what is commonly referred to as the parable of the seed, but I think the more appropriate name is the parable of the soil. The seed is the word of Elohim, and the soil is the condition of the heart. So as we read, though it extends to 4 different types of people, only one makes the most of it and makes disciples who make disciples. That is the true fruitfulness, mark of fruitfulness, if you are a disciple who is making disciples who are making disciples. And he spoke to them much in parables, saying, "See, the sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some indeed fell by the wayside, and the birds came and devoured them. And others fell on rocky places where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprang up, because they had no depth of soil. But when the sun was up, they were scorched, and because they had no root, they had withered. Others fell among thorns, and the thorns came up and choked them. And others fell on good soil and yielded a crop, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. So all the items are representative of something beyond itself, and in the absence of his explanation, which he deigns to share with the disciples, both present and future, we can know what they know from his explanation, because otherwise these are riddles and enigmas that the modern mind has no way of figuring out. The ancient mind was certainly trafficked in more riddles than we do, but between the parable itself and the explanation, there's just a question of the disciples. They want to know why he's teaching in parables, and he says that it's given to you to know the secrets of the reign of the heavens, but to them it has not been given. So there's a division: those who accept and embrace and who hear the message and embrace it and embark on the life, and those who discard it and just give up on it. But it's to you, to disciples, both present and future. Revelation demands a responsible use, and we cannot expect to gain greater access to more advanced stages and levels and tiers of revelation if we do not responsibly use the revelation we are given. Luke 16:10 comes to mind. He who is faithful in much can be entrusted to be faithful in a lot. To paraphrase, but then he quotes Isaiah 6:9 and 10. This is from Isaiah's calling. He's up against an apostate nation of rebellious people who are. Isaiah is told he will be rejected and resisted and ridiculed. Nothing misleading about the commission that he is called on. And then he says, "And blessed are your eyes because they see, and your ears because they hear." So he's not talking about physical eyes or physical ears. There is eyes of faith, 2 Corinthians 5:7, and the ears of faith. We can hear, the spiritually in tune person can hear the voice of God spoken through others and through him himself if they have the ears of faith. So it's not a completely parallel. Of course, we don't have spiritual receptors or vision, but we do have analogous functions. For truly I say to you that many prophets and righteous ones long to see what you see and did not see it, and to hear what you hear and did not hear it. So they are privileged to information that the prophets and the saints of yesteryear would have killed for. The saints of a previous dispensation, all they had was the promise. Now they had the promise revealed and given and just made manifest. So these are mysteries of heaven, which give us the key, which can unlock and enable us to access that blessed abode. Then he offers his explanation of the parable. Remember what I read from verses 3 through 9, or 8 thereabouts. You then hear the parable of the sower. When anyone hears the word of the kingdom and does not understand it, then the wicked one comes up and snatches away what was sown in his heart. That is what is sown by the wayside. We read of the wicked one, that is Satan, that is the evil one, our spiritual enemy and adversary. He repeats in the material we're going to cover in greater detail today. So the presence and existence of a spiritual enemy means that he's trying to tear down and destroy that everything that God is building on earth. And so he's the one who plucks up the seeds. He just takes them out before they can even grow. He wants to snatch you early and young and keep you enslaved in sin for the rest of your life without the born again experience. And that sown on rocky places, this is he who hears the word and immediately receives it with joy. So yet he has no root in himself, but is short-lived. And when pressure or persecution arises because of the word, immediately he stumbles. So this is a fair-weather disciple with ephemeral enthusiasm for the calling. There is a certain attraction to calling yourself a Christian, but once you embrace the calling, you find it's not as attractive as you might have once imagined, and this is what separates the wise from the weak. The weak just run away. They just get scared and they throw in the towel as soon as someone ridicules them in public, when they give a public testimony, and then they retreat and give it up and just don't make any other advances in their life. These are fair weather disciples, so it's only right that they know good. They're not going to be disciples who are making disciples, which is the goal we're all after. So without the roots, the seed is dependent, it becomes a root, and but if the plant doesn't have any roots, it has no life. And so that sown among thorns is he who hears the word, and the worry of this age and the deceit of riches choke the word, and it becomes fruitless. So thorns were growth deterrents in ancient agriculture and present-day agriculture too, where thorns are, and this is analogous to the thorns which are the worries of the age. He speaks disparagingly of the worry and anxiety in the Sermon on the Mount, the 6th chapter, and the deceit of riches. Riches promise more than they can deliver. They promise, people pursue it because they think they will be satisfied with greater abundance, and it all, even if you gain all the treasure in the world, you can't take any of it with it. Naked you came into the earth, naked you shall return. So they have their priorities. They don't want to pay the price financially of being a Christian or anything else. And that sown on the good soil is he who hears the word and understands it, who indeed bears fruit and yield, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. So all of us have evangelical potential. When we are disciples, we have at least the theoretical potential to make others of ourselves. And, we're not all called to yield Billy Graham results. We do the best we can with the abilities and the opportunities that God puts in our path. We have to make the most of it and respond accordingly. And some of us might make 100 disciples if we are especially fruitful, others 60 and others 30, and 30 is okay if you give it your all. God rewards the effort, not the outcome. The material we're going to cover begins in the 24th verse. This is the parable of the wheats and the weeds, so it's similarly agricultural. And then we we began the lesson that this is the prequel to in verses 31 through 35, and then 44 through 50. So that's the bulk of the parables. A lot of these parables are just simple, brief, terse statements that are self-evident in themselves and require no explanation. The first two are a little, but in the order in which they are arranged, and we'll review the other lesson, at least what comes in between, not so much after when we get there. But so 24th verse, lesson itself. Another parable he put before them, saying, the kingdom of the heaven shall be like a man who sowed good seed in his field. This establishes the precedent which all remaining parables are introduced. He uses the kingdom of the heaven as he's alluding to the kingdom of the heaven with his parable. So each parable is designed to impart a kingdom truth and a revelation and a secret and a mystery pertaining to the kingdom. And the one that he uses is a man sowing good seed in his field, but this is not exactly the same analogies as the preceding parable. But good seed, we'll learn that what that means as we read more. But while men slept, his enemy came and sowed darnel along the wheat and went away. So there's the enemy. It's not necessarily our spiritual enemy. This is just a man who has someone out there who has a grudge against him and wants to see him not prosper. So he actually goes out in the middle of the night and sows darnel, whatever that is. I don't exactly know, but it certainly wasn't good seed. It was designed as a deterrent to the wheat, and the wheats and the weeds are virtually physically and visibly indistinct from each other. The revelation of which is which does not come until the harvest is gleaned. So that's one of the mysteries that farmers have to abide with. Is this wheat or is this weed? And when the blade sprouted and bore fruit, then the darnel also appeared. So at the same time, there's a simultaneous cause and effect. Both the blade sprouted, that's the healthy plant, that's the desired plant, that's the fruitful plant. But then at the same time, or not long then after, or right around approximately as soon as the one goes up, so too does the other. The darnel, that is the deterrent, also arises in the same physical vicinity and proximity, and they're not going to get along, and they're not going to mix well just by law of nature. And the servants of the master of the house came and said to him, Master, did you not sow good seed in your field? From where then does it have the darnel? So these servants would have been familiar with the mechanics of the master, having gone out into the field and done the sowing, taking the due diligence, getting what needs to be done before he can get what ultimately needs to be done. The sowing, we reap what we sow. So in order to reap, we have to sow. That's the order of the equation. And they want to know, where is this darnel coming from? Because they have no notion that an enemy came and planted this. So Satan plants false Christians in our midst, and that is one of the challenge, because he always has a foot inside a foot in the door of the house of God. And he said to them, an enemy did this, and the servant said to him, do you want then that we go gather them up? So the servants, they asked their master, do you want us to go pluck them up, get rid of the weeds, get rid of the unpleasant, ugly, lifeless deterrents in the midst of the garden? And his answer may surprise us, but he said, no, lest while you gather up the darnel, you also uproot the wheat with them. So he's determined to live with both. He takes the good and the bad, and he does not want to interfere. So that means that judgment is not our own. We cannot, kill or exclude unnecessarily anyone in our midst. So we Christians are called to the life of non-retaliation. We observe a higher standard than the lex talionis of the Old Covenant, which is to forsake the principle of retaliation. So, we got to learn to live with people where we can't kill. That's one of the challenges of being a life. Some people, belonging to the country we belong to. let both grow together until the harvest, and at the time of the harvest I shall say to the reapers, first gather the darnel, and bind them in bundles to burn them, and gather the wheat into my granary. So he's determined to wait until the harvest reveals itself through the process. The wheat will be, right now they are somewhat visibly indistinct, but the servants are astute enough gardeners to know that something it doesn't belong there, and it's hard to tell from a certain vantage point, but they get in and do the dirt, dig in the dirt and do the work, and they notice darnels distinct from the wheat. But in the passage of time, then they will be revealed, and then he's just going to have them all gathered up. So, it's an act of mercy to let the wicked persist in their wickedness and just invite the own natural cause and effects consequences of their own sins. This is when he's given up on you, and he gives you up, as he says thrice in the first chapter of Romans. But burning, we can anticipate that is going to be hellfire, because as we learn in the explanation, I didn't want to reveal too much in advance. We'll elaborate on the master's explanation after we do a little prequel of what we reviewed what we began in the other lesson. But it's analogous to hellfire, so he's talking about salvation, and the possibility exists that we do land in hell. Then he tells a parable of the mustard seed, which is, in itself, in its embryonic form, it is a small seed, but from small things grow great things. It blossoms into a tree, an intimidating tree that obscures all the plants in its midst. So even though it is a small seed, from small things come great things. So all it takes is a mustard seed of faith for us to have sufficient faith to be saved. And then the other parable is that of leaven, which is usually analogous to sin in that it has a contagious ripple effect in its immediate vicinity. But it's also conducive to growth. That's what enables the growth in the bread. It enables it to rise to its more fluffy status. And then in verse 34, we read the same thing we read of in Mark 4:34. And Yahshua said all this to a crowd in parables, and he did not speak to them without a parable. So the parables have, for all intents and purposes, replaced sermons as his primary mode and method of teaching. These are not as long as sermons, but they have, some of them are longer than the others. The ones we just reviewed are just self-evident. You don't need an explanation to interpret that for yourself. But the one we just covered, which I didn't reveal too much of, but we see our answer to the direction of his answer. So verse 36, then having sent the crowd away, Yahshua went into the house, and his disciples came to him, saying, explain to us the parable of the darnel of the field. So the apostles asked the disciples, as they are designated here, asked the same question they ask in verse 10, or someone similar. They want to know the meaning of it, or not exactly, forget I said that, but just stay focused on here. And they want to know, this is a riddle to them, so they cede to the author. They respect the authorial authority to know the meaning, so they do not deign to interpret themselves. They want to know from the conceiver of the parable itself, the author of it, what it means. And he answering said to them, he who is sowing the good seed is the Son of Man. Son of Man is a self-reference. It is a messianic title with origins in the book of Daniel 7:13, but it is used, I think, 82 times throughout all four Gospels, and it just indicates his humanity but also his divinity, because he is the Son of Yahweh, but he's also the Son of Man. He was born of a woman, so that's the divine human duality within him. And he is the one who is the farmer sowing the seeds in this parable, which will make more sense as he elaborates more fully. And the field is the world, and the good seed, there are the sons of the kingdom, but the darnel are the sons of the wicked one. So the field is not the soil of a human heart that we have to cultivate, as it was in the parable of the soil, better known as the parable of the seeds, but my own preferred title, as I already explained earlier, is that. But, in this one, the field is the world, so the whole world is a harvest. We have to carry the good news to the ends of the earth in order for the kingdom to come before that final exalted expectation arrives. We have to get this message across the world, and the fact is, in our present world, the Bible is banned in 52 countries, so we have a lot of work to do before we can expect the king to return. But this dichotomy and division in the world exists between those who are saved and those who are damned. These are the children of the wicked one, the children of the heaven. The sons of the kingdom are the saints, the elect, the saved, whatever you want to call us. And the darnel is the unfaithful and unbelieving reprobates, the unrepentant reprobates who die in their sin because they are sons of the wicked one, who wants us to die in our sins because that brings us down to hell with him, and misery enjoys company. He knows his time is short, so our spiritual enemy is motivated to destroy the work of God in our lives. So an awareness of his existence is paramount to a spiritual survival. Like there is a real devil, there are real demons, they were real in the Bible, they are real today. There is a devil, there are demons. These are our spiritual enemies. And the enemy who sowed them is the devil, and the harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are the angels. So we read of 3 types of people and 3 things. The enemy is the devil, and the harvest is the end of the age. This is the time which inaugurated on the cross. We are in the end times ever since. The apostles referred to it as the last days. Paul and John and all the rest, they were convinced that they were in the last age, and we are in the last dispensation before the 7th and final one on the earth. And then this earth as we know it becomes the new heaven and new earth, is burned up in fire. But the reapers are the angels. So there's going to be angels. Whenever angels are present, there is something spiritually significant in the midst. The angels are the divine, the ones who minister on behalf of divinity. They minister, they succor the saints, and they will welcome them. But the enemy who sowed them is the devil, because the sons of the wicked one are the ones who end up being fruitless spiritually, because they are succumbing to the satanic snares. As the darnel then is gathered and burned in the fire, so shall it be at the end of the age. So when it's all said and done, in the final and ultimate analysis, there is a heaven and there is a hell, and the darnel, the children of Satan, the tools of Satan, the ones who mimic his ways and follow his path and embrace his teachings, and just in every way, shape, and form are his disciples, and they are fit only. Hell is created by necessity of the character of those who dwell there. So it was, it became necessary once the devil, rebelled, when Lucifer rebelled against Elohim. That's when hell became necessary, and it becomes necessary for the certain people who are his children and inherit his inheritance. So his inheritance is death and hell, and our inheritance is life and eternity. The Son of Man shall send out the angels, and they shall gather out of his kingdom all the stumbling blocks and those doing lawlessness, and shall throw them into the furnace of fire. There shall be wailing and gnashing of teeth. So this is the final judgment, when the Son of Man returns in his splendor and lays judgment all across the earth. And this is the day of Yahweh. The second coming is roughly the same thing as it was in the Old Testament day of Yahweh. The second coming is certainly very much that in the New Testament equation. And the furnace of fire is hell, and there's going to be wailing and gnashing of teeth. There's going to be our spiritual enemy is likened to a roaring lion roaming about, seeking whom he may devour in 1 Peter 5:8. So just imagine gnashing of teeth, a fierce carnivore that's just determined to bite you and devour you and consume you whole and just to steal your salvation. That's what our spiritual enemy is all about. He rejoices in getting the born-again believers to stumble and to follow his paths. And I personally believe you can be born again and wind up in hell if you do not retain the sincerity of the born-again conviction and initiative. Then the righteous shall shine forth as the sun of the kingdom of the Father. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. So this is the 43rd and final verse of this lesson. But the righteous, they're going to be exalted in splendor, and they're going to shine as the sun in the kingdom. That is their inheritance. That is their blessing. They can reflect his radiance, and the Father is the source of light. The Father and the Lamb are the light in the temple, the sun and the moon. There is no need of them, for their radiance shines, and we will shine and bask in their radiant glow. So pay attention to that. That's what we all want, and we have the mysteries and the roadmap to get there, and it is revealed in parables such as this. Now, what we've already covered, what this lesson is prequel for, is just verses 44 through 50, and there we read of several parables. Parable of the treasure hidden in the field, parable of the pearl of great price, and the dragnet. And so these are the five. I think this is 5, 6, and 7. And then we got a little range to cover from verse 51 to 58, but we may combine that with the first 12 chapters of Matthew's 14th chapter for the next lesson. That's all the time we have for right now. Thank you so much. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned until next time. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.